PowerPoint, and they'll be discussing the protocols here at Gloria Dei for us. So thank you.
You're welcome. Thanks, Chris.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And just to give you a little background on where we are with safety and security, last May, towards the end of May, we were talking at council about a couple of security issues, and we said, gee, it'd be nice if we had a plan. And somebody said, wait, there is a plan. And so Deacon Pam knew where it was, and we found it, and indeed there's a plan. The downside is it was created in 2008, long before the remodeling was done, and it's just that all the people involved and assigned to tasks are no longer here. So we decided we really needed to relook at the plan. And so we spent some time this summer. Marissa and I, the plan is quite complete. It's about, I don't know, 35 pages in length of just about nearly everything that we needed to talk about, but it just is outdated. And so Marissa and I started, and we thought, how can we make this either simpler, but yet effective? After the remodeling, did we have enough signage around the building? And we realized, you know, the signage isn't really accurate either anymore that we have. So we got together and we put together, basically it's going to be a two-pronged approach. The detailed policy, there are 4 of us meeting in early October to start updating that. And I don't think it's going to be a bad job, but it does need to be updated. So that is not something we're sharing today, other than we're working on it. And we'll have some input on that and some things later. In the meantime, one thing we did want to do is, how do we get something put together quickly for some signage across around the building? And so we're going to be doing that this morning, sharing our initial draft. And then also, Marissa's been working on one component that wasn't in our safety plan, and that was children. And what do we do with safety and security with kids, with adult volunteers, and everything else? So to start out with, would you like me to go ahead with the draft, or you want to do the child safety stuff first? What would you prefer?
So, Chris, go ahead and go to the next slide, will you? So you just did the intro.
Yeah,
You're the next.
So do you want me to?
So you currently underway. You touched on that.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is this being recorded?
It is.
It is.
Yes.
It'll be available.
Yes.
Okay.
Probably. So it'll be uploaded this afternoon, probably,
Okay.
and available via a private YouTube link that will be emailed to members tomorrow.
Okay. Very good. Thank you so much.
Yep. You're welcome, Roger. Thanks.
All right. So we're in the process of reassessing, but then you wanted to talk about child and safety things before I do that.
Sure. Yes.
That's
Yeah.
correct. Correct. Okay.
Okay. So one of the things, first of all, good morning. One of the things that we discovered when we were reviewing the current policy as it stands, which was written in, as Roy mentioned, in 2008, revised and ratified by council in 2018. So this is pre-pandemic. Was it doesn't say anything about child safety policies. As you all, I'm sure, have heard or are familiar, we've got, scandals in the Catholic Church and scandals left and right. And one instance of a child safety matter can often sink an organization. So we identified that portion of that policy was missing, and have been working with examples from the Synod and other congregations in our Synod to create a child safety policy, which we will write and send to council for their approval and review and their adoption ultimately. But in the meantime, because as both with Roy and I both have backgrounds in education, we knew that we couldn't simply just start the year willy-nilly and not at least put in some best practices. Even while that policy is being written and adopted, there are just generally some, I guess I'd call them key, right, procedures that we have already begun in family ministries. And so we thought we would just review some of those key things today with you. And then later on this morning, Roy and I will ask you if you want to return to this topic when all of these things get sort of ratified by council, and we can have a more, I don't know, how should I say, thorough or complete presentation of everything that is done and is adopted fully by council. But in the meantime, so we've been working in family ministries with some key policies. Their current volunteer staff, which already numbers over 20 volunteers just for Sunday mornings. That doesn't even count embodied baptism members, high school ministry volunteers, just elementary level volunteers have already been trained in some of these areas. And I would say the top 5 things for you to know is that number one key policy is that we are screening and training volunteers. So in the policy, it will require that everyone intending to volunteer must have completed all appropriate paperwork. That's a pretty thorough volunteer information form, which asks for driver's license and insurance for that. And I'll get back down to that more thoroughly in just a minute. Names and other aliases that you have used. It does then provide us an opportunity to perform a background check. Our church's insurance company actually will run those for us, and it's not expensive, which is rare. When I first started doing children's ministry almost 20 years ago, that's freaky. Background checks were super expensive for volunteers, and our insurance company, we feel confident, will help us make sure that the volunteers who do volunteer are safe, so they will be screened. And that they will also be trained. They have to attend a training of some kind, whether that's a video training, an in-person training, whatever that is. And then they'll sign a document that says that they have read and intend to follow the child safety policy of Gloria Dei Lutheran Church. So we have that assent from them that, yes, I'm aware of these policies. So nobody can say, oh, I didn't know. No, you did. You came to training, you signed the document, period, end of story. The second key is something that we call the 2 adult rule. This is there shall always be 2, parentheses, screened and trained, adults with any group of children. I put adults in parentheses or quotes because if any of you have taken a trip upstairs in the last couple of weeks, we have quite a few middle school and high school students who are teaching classes. It's awesome. We've got 2 high school gentlemen who are buddies who I said, hey, you can teach 2nd and 3rd grade. And they were like, okay. And they're fabulous at it. And the little kids adore them. However,
Lars and Joel.
Right now?
Yes, wasn't going to use their names because this is recorded and we posted to the internet.
Gotcha.
Sorry. Anyway, so they're obviously not adults, right? They're not 18 years of age or older as the state of Iowa defines an adult. However, we have written into the policy ways to accommodate those kinds of students who are ready to leverage their influence, who are ready to lead, who are ready to be given that kind of permission and encouragement. And what the policy will eventually say is that we can make accommodation for that by either, number one, putting them together with someone who is 18 years of age or older, or if there are 2 of them, that we leave doors open. We have an adult who constantly checks on them. So when those 2 gentlemen, and today in kindergarten and 1st grade, it's a high schooler and a middle schooler, because their adult is gone today, we have the door open and there's an adult, our Sunday school superintendent is walking the halls, eyeballs in classrooms, ears on classrooms, that kind of thing. So we can still ensure the safety of children with that 2 adult rule, even if they're not, quote, adults. Thirdly, check-in and check-out procedures. All children must be checked in and checked out to an approved adult. And what that simply means is when we send them a registration form at the beginning of the year to get ready to know that they are coming to us, we ask parents to list names of adults who have the parent or guardian's permission to pick up their child, right? We're not just going to sign or hand kids, here, free kid. We're not going to be handing kids out to random people. We want to know that the people who are approved to pick them up are the people who are approved to pick them up and are who are picking them up. And we ask them to initial them in and initial them out. It does two things. Number one, it helps us to know, oh, yeah, that student was picked up. They didn't just wander out the door, because that happens in preschool. And sometimes it's my kid who wanders out the door and he's not in preschool. Prevents them from wandering out and the leaders not knowing. But also, too, it helps us to know, okay, that's an approved adult who came to pick them up. Signing them in helps us to know, yes, it's an assent from the parents or guardians that, yes, they know that they are in our care. They're supposed to be there. Everybody knows where this little is, and it's all kosher. Transportation, I hinted in the first policy, the key policy, that we ask for driver's license numbers and valid insurance. If you're transporting kids, right? I mean, we might go on a retreat. We might do a mission trip. You know, we're taking a couple of vans and we need someone to drive. There is a section in there that talks about transportation, having a valid driver's license, having valid insurance. You must be 25 years of age or older, right? There's that 25-year-old. What was I telling you about that, Chris? The 25-year-old brain thing. So there's a whole section in there about transportation. There's also safe touch and physical contact. We say the delineation of safe touch, so we define that very clearly. We also say no physical contact in disciplinary situations. We don't do corporal punishment, right? That's just not something we do. That physical contact in a tense situation is only to be used if you have to protect yourself, the other students, or the individual themselves who's having a tough time, right? From hurting themselves or anything like that. So that just says, you know, that our volunteers, or I tell my volunteers, you know, if somebody's really losing it, you know, you're gonna talk to them the first time. You're gonna say, hey, you know, I really want you to be here, but I can only let you say if you're gonna participate in a positive way. And if that doesn't happen, then they come get me. And the kids know they don't want to talk to Miss Marissa, right? It's like going to the principal's office. I don't want to do that. And I'm going to give them the same options, right? And we say, listen, you can go back if you can participate in a way that's helpful to everyone else. Otherwise, we're just going to go find your grown-up. Period. End of story. So those are kind of the 5 keys in that policy. When it comes to you, it will be several pages. It seems like a lot of minutia, but I think that, right, again, circling back to what I said at the beginning, you know, we seem to hear about these kinds of situations every day. Just last week, I think you probably all heard in the news that Cedar Rapids Public Schools was in trouble with the Department of Justice, right, for seclusion and restraint, use of seclusion and restraint rooms, like those kinds of things. Like the constant mindfulness is tough, yes, but I think it's a good way to protect not only the kids, but the congregation as well. Questions? That's a lot. Questions, Ben, and it's not very, right, it's not even very specific because we're still working on the exact language of the policy, but any questions about that at this particular time? Okay, cool. Back to Roy.
All right. So one of the things we decided also needed to get done right away was we needed to put together some basic signage. And so we have run this past council. Marissa and I, as we talked about it, decided it'd be valuable to get your input before we did any final copies, because once we do the signage, it'll be bright in color, and we didn't want to spend a lot of money doing that and find out, you know, this wasn't real clear to people. And so we want to make sure we get some feedback. So Chris is handing out some black and white copies. I wish I could say I was smart enough to design this page, but I wasn't. As I took training as a docent for the new University of Iowa Library, Art Museum. This was a sheet similar to this that they had created, and I really liked it because it was simple. You could put several throughout the building, and we could, you know, it's colorful enough that it attracts everyone's attention. if somebody has a severe weather thing or medical emergency, they can look quickly at the graphic and say, okay, this is where I need to be and this is what I need to be checking out. And so obviously, I mean, we've got severe weather potential tonight, so there's never, it's never too early to start doing this. But our goal is to get this thing finalized and put up throughout the building in the next couple of weeks. We're not going to wait for the whole policy guide to do that. So we just wanted to look through each, and one thing we talked about was how important it was to talk to the congregation about our policies, because if people weren't aware of what to do, what good does it to have a policy if nobody knows where it is or what's in it? And so that's the rationale for getting this started right away. The tornado severe weather, there are a lot of good places in the building. Well, thank you.
It's bigger. You can read it.
That's great. Anyway, it says take shelter in the basement level bathrooms along inner wall, the hallway, storage room, right of the women's restroom, stay away from windows, above grade exterior walls. And the biggest thing that I remember when I'd meet with safety and security people in Dubuque County, where I spent my career, was rooms like this are not good because they're big spans of roof, ceiling, and there aren't really small spaces. So we want to find some smaller spaces. And so that will be something, to address. And in schools, when we did this stuff, we had the same clients every day. And everybody had an assignment of where to go, what to do, how to keep track of people. Church isn't like that. There are different people here every day, whether it's LCM students, the 8 o'clock congregation may be different from the 10:30, but it may be the same, and things change. And so you can't really say, well, this person's going to do this, or this class, this group of people goes to this room. It needs to be kind of generic, but it needs to kind of direct us where we go. So keep that in mind. Medical emergencies, the next one, call 911, and we've got the church address right at the top of the sheet, so that if you're the one calling, you've got that address right in front of you. So when you're talking to emergency people, you can make that contact. And just a lot of these are common sense things, but at the same time, stay on the phone, stay with the victim until professional help arrives. Apply whatever first aid you can. When help arrives, allow responding units to take control. Okay? Fire alarm. Do not assume that it's a false alarm. That's one thing, if something goes off, don't just think, oh, I bet it's just something went wrong and we shouldn't really react to it. You do need to react, and you need to move to the closest exit, evacuate immediately. If you're able to help those who need assistance, please do that. Obviously, people, I know in schools, we had students with wheelchairs. We had particular people assigned to those students to make sure they got out. Well, again, at church, we don't know who's going to be here each Sunday. So we all need to be looking around and making sure if somebody's with a walker or in a wheelchair, that we get them out safely. One of the interesting things was using a fire extinguisher only if safe to do so and you have been trained. Our council conversation was the first goal should be to get out of the building, okay? But if it is a small thing and you know how to use a fire extinguisher, we should use it. The kitchen has some tremendous, I thought, just wonderfully designed things to help fires from breaking out and from cooking fires. There are some systems in there that I'm not sure. I have no idea who knows how to use them. But that might be an adult ed session at some point where we can move around the building and do some of that, because
They're automatic.
there are all, but isn't there some that you have to flip on?
No, they're all automatic.
They're all automatic. Okay, great.
The stove won't work unless it's activated.
Yeah.
If those hoods aren't working, the stove won't work.
Right. But do you have to, isn't there something, Clay, that we saw you had to push to?
That's just to make the stove work, not to make the fire
extinguishing system.
Okay, great.
Do
See?
you want to repeat that in the microphone, Roy? Just in case anybody. has
Sure, the
questions.
stove prevention systems are automatic, and so they should kick in. Good, that's one less thing we have to worry about training people then. So that's good. And this is what I'm talking about, though. A lot of us may not know how the system works. Yeah, and Clay and I did an inventory of fire extinguishers. They're all over the building, and there's usually signage where they are. And so that's one thing we need to double check the signage, but I think most places in the building where there are fire extinguishers, there's signage. And so, but again, our goal at council, our discussion was make sure people get out. You know, we're not going to try and we're not the firefighters, but yet at the same time, you know, our first goal is to get out. But that may be a training session someday that we need to have on how to handle fire extinguishers. Chemical spill, hazardous material emergency, we've got that on there. The armed intruder and active shooter piece. That's something that sort of triggered that initial conversation because there was an active shooter in May at a congregation somewhere. And it wasn't the first time, but it's been a few times that's happened, unfortunately. And that's what triggered the initial conversation of what do we do during safety and emergency things. And this one, again, this particular one is taken primarily from the University of Iowa Art Museum emergency response guide. Call 911 in case of imminent life-threatening incidents. Each individual should take actions necessary to protect their own life. If possible, flee the area and avoid danger. And something I discovered on my tour, and maybe you all know it, I'm just still kind of new here, but through the sacristy is a stairway that leads down here. And that might be a great escape route if there was somebody, an active shooter in the sanctuary.
That you don't even know, you don't even need to go to the sacristy, actually, right to the left of the organ, there's a sign that says exit,
Yes.
and that comes downstairs.
Okay, so that's a quick way. So there are two quick ways people could funnel out of there. And again, it might be worth a walkthrough someday during adult ed just to see where all these places are. The other thing it says, you know, is, you know, if it's not a safe option, lock or barricade doors. Well, we've got kind of a glass wall in the back there. And I'm doubting it's bulletproof. So we need to, you know, we need to stay alert to that. And if you can get to a safe area, turn off the lights, remain quiet and out of sight. If necessary, take action to ensure survival. Attempt to incapacitate the assailant by either throwing items or with physical aggression. 15 years ago, I think the policy was everybody just hides. And that has slowly evolved over time where people need to be active responders, throwing hymnals, whatever it takes to take on, you know, the shooter. But again, we want to be safe, evacuate if possible, but know that is another possible response that, you know, people can look at. Mental health personal crisis. Now there is a 988 number that we need to incorporate in this that we found out about since then. But you know, not everything is always visible. And maybe somebody's in church and is really feeling a mental crisis, or you're with somebody who has that, and you sense they have a crisis. We thought this would be an important piece to have on our sheet as well. And so, you know, simply how do we connect somebody to get mental health assistance? And that's an emergency too, you know, as people get into situations. Bomb threats. If you receive a threat, keep calm and obtain as much information as possible. I went through one of these one time, and it's hard to keep calm when you're on the phone, listening to a bomb threat. And you try and keep them on the phone, but these are the kinds of things you try and get at, because when emergency people get here, they're going to want to know the kind of information that you receive. You know, so, and sometimes people just, they like talking about that. I mean, that was my experience. The person went on talking with me for about 3 or 4 minutes while the secretary was calling 911. It well, I've got it in the ceiling over the third grade classroom, okay, why didn't you pick out that classroom, and then they talked a little more. That may not always be the case, but sometimes they're at that point of mental health that they will talk through some of that stuff. Do not disconnect the line. Have someone else use another phone. If found, obviously, if you find something that's suspicious, we don't handle it. We move away and call 911. The last couple things on there, the AED machine is located on the wall near the main office. And then the first aid kits. Everywhere listed, they exist. We did that inventory as well. We made sure that, okay, we say we have this stuff in our policy. Let's make sure they're really there. And they are. One thing I would suggest is if you need a first aid kit and you use stuff out of it, make sure Annie in the office knows. Yeah, hey, we had to take out 17 bandages or something to deal with this. The other thing is there are two places Clay and I found that we thought should have had a different kind of a first aid kit. One, upstairs in the balcony, we could not find a first aid kit. So we thought the best place, even though there are first aid kits in the Sunday school rooms, we thought we needed something that somebody coming out of the balcony who maybe wasn't with education can see it right when they walk out the door. And so it's going to be mounted on the wall right outside the balcony so people can see that there's a first aid kit there. That was one location we picked up on. The other one is in LCM. We thought they have a first aid kit, but again, it's in a cupboard. And most places they're in cupboards or on shelves, there is a sign that says, first aid kit here. We may want to look at bigger signs, but there are signs. But the one in LCM is in a cupboard. We thought maybe one of those need to be on the wall as well.
Say, Roy, it
Yes.
occurs to me that the only two we have down here are in rooms that are typically locked.
Oh. So maybe we need a third one.
I think either in this room
That's a great,
or perhaps near the coffee or in the hallway.
because the kitchen is normally locked.
Kitchen's normally locked and the nursery's normally locked.
Great.
That was also part of the deal with the Sunday school rooms upstairs. During the week, those rooms are all locked.
Right. Yeah. So that's a good thought. Thank you. Because as I was saying that, I was scanning the room and thinking, oh, it's got to be here somewhere besides the kitchen, but it isn't. So the kitchen and nursery are locked. So Clay, I think we'll need to order a third one. And, or we put one of the other ones in here first, but let's see. So basically, this is our thought, and this is what we have already put the draft of this up in the Sunday school rooms because we thought, oops.
That was me.
Oh, that was you. I was going to say, I didn't hit any buttons. I already hit one button this morning that wasn't right, so I didn't want to hit any more. Anyway, so these we've placed upstairs right now in the Sunday school rooms. As Marissa said, there were some things we just couldn't wait for, and we needed to get some of that stuff up. So today, one of our goals before we leave is, are there things in there that you think, this is a draft, that really should be clarified or something added? The goal is to keep one sheet with color-coded graphics, brief instructions, but still, is there something when you looked at that, you said, I don't really know what that means, or I wish you'd said it differently? So before we finalize anything, we want to get some input from you, and maybe you're fine with everything, but I'm tossing that out there now. Adele.
You might want to clarify the fire extinguishers. There's one upstairs and probably in Doug's office that's only to be used on the organ or computers. That sort of needs to be labeled.
Reminder, the online people can't hear what she's saying.
Yes,
so-
thank you. The question was, we should take a look at a couple of the specialty fire extinguishers. There's at least one in Doug's office that has for technology, wiring and stuff like that, and also one for the organ. Are there two of those? One by the organ though also?
Yes.
That's what I thought. So if there are two of those and they're the same, that's what I was getting at. One of the things I think, personally, I think we need is a fire extinguisher session to sometime during adult ed, where either we have a group of volunteers, we try and talk the ushers into doing that, or people who are interested and want to learn how to, how to operate that stuff, because they're specialty fire extinguishers.
Clay and I met with a fireman at the fire department and learned that it'd be very detrimental to use one of the standard fire extinguishers on electrical.
Right. So, okay, so you're seeing,
People need to know that.
we need to, that's one of our training needs.
Right.
Thank you.
Would someone from the fire department come to provide that training? Do we have anyone?
That is,
They probably would.
that is an even better
I
idea.
could ask a friend of mine I golf with, who's a retired fire, and I think he had moved up the ranks a bit. I'll ask him.
They may have a training.
Okay,
Yeah.
yep. Good.
They'll come and they'll set up little drums that where fire is, and you can actually use the fire extinguisher.
Okay, good.
So do we want a hands-on adult forum sometime?
To take a little walk through the building also and see where some of these smaller rooms are, whether it's an LCM or some of the, I think that'd be a great idea. And so, and I think the fire extinguisher piece is critical. You had your hand up first.
I was saying, everybody that's employed at the hospital always has to go, require fire safety training, and it was from the fire department.
Once a year.
So I was
It's
gonna.
changed.
I
You
was
don't
gonna
have to do
suggest
that
that.
anymore. You do it virtually.
Oh.
But-
Yeah.
The concept is though, training is important, whether it's in person or whatever. Yes,
Is there some staff person, if something happens when we're having a meeting or whatever, is there some staff person that you should relate to? If you are the one who was involved with the emergency?
I would say at this
Trying to do it
point,
yourself?
Yeah.
I think at this point, you need to let probably the office know whether it's Annie, but if, this is why our policy needs to be redone, because everybody that you're supposed to tell in the policy, they don't work here anymore. They're not on call. I mean, seriously, there are people, I had no idea who they were. And then there are some that, like, Deacon Pam was a major contact for some of this stuff. So that's a really good question. And that's one
What
of the,
exactly is the question? I missed what.
oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, I keep forgetting to do that. The question is, who do we let know if there's something goes on that you're involved with out of the office and, or, at a staff person? Who is the person that's going to be the contact? And that's going to have to be part of our follow-up discussion in early October as a committee. That's one of the main goals, is to say, who are the people?
In general, so if there's like a general fire alarm or a severe weather event, you would follow so if you're in worship, right? Somebody up front, Roger, Sarah, myself, Michael, some staff member because we'll all go back and be trained through this policy ourselves, will give a direction, right, for you. My direction to my volunteer staff is you evacuate. Here's how you evacuate. Here's where you go. When you get there, this is what you do. You take attendance, you sit down and you wait. And what we are waiting for as leaders is an all clear from emergency personnel. So if that happens, say on a Sunday morning, say we have like a fire event and we evacuate, children and the volunteer staff will evacuate to one parking lot. All the other people in the building will evacuate to a separate parking lot. We will take attendance and watch kids. You all will gather there. Fire or emergency personnel will do what they do. They will then give an all clear to whoever the staff who are here who are in charge, whether that's Roger, Sarah, myself, Annie, and then we will give you instruction as to what to do next. If it's okay, if there was a false alarm and it's okay to resume activities, we'll do that. If it's not okay, obviously we'll have parents and guardians come check out their kids, right? They still have to sign them out. and then we all go home. Does that make sense? So primarily, and it's situation dependent, Barbara, like that's why it's kind of weird and wonky. And that's where Roy's getting at. Like in the policy, it identifies, well, in this situation, it's this person or whoever, except that half of those people, 3/4 of them, are no longer here. So we're working through that, and we will, I assume probably we'll have a follow-up session, or you'll be apprised of the final policy, and then that'll be a little bit clearer.
You know, one other thing, yeah, and some of the policy things, for example, during fire, you know, to go over next to the old LCM building. Well, my experience working with firefighters, that's way too close. You need, or if there's a bomb threat, you don't want to be that close. So we need to rework some of those location spots as well. But yeah, as notify a staff member, but once we get this finalized, that's an important, all these are important questions. Every question I asked this morning has been really important. Yeah, Julie.
I have 2 comments. Gracia brought up the fact that if we have training, probably the AED machine should be part of that training so that people do not feel uncomfortable using that machine.
Okay, so the last comment for those at home, when we do this training, we should include AED training.
I think
as
is
well.
Martin Priest involved in that? I think
Mark
that's in the works.
Okay, I know Mark has been involved in the AED distribution and things.
Yeah.
Is he a trainer as well?
We were waiting for COVID to pass us, and then he's been wanting to schedule a training session.
Okay, so Mark, somebody thinks Mark Priest is maybe involved with that.
We
Gracious.
did have this a few years ago.
Oh.
Very, very poorly attended. People think it's really hard and it's really easy.
Yeah.
They're afraid of it, and so the attendance was terrible.
Comment again being, was the last time the attendance was very low when we did this a few years ago, pre-pandemic, because of fears of how difficult it would be. But the reality was it's not a difficult thing to do. And so I'd encourage all of you here and those online, when we have these training sessions, please participate, because, you know, it's the person sitting next to you might be the beneficiary of that training. And so,
I think we did that not on a Sunday morning. Is that
No,
true?
it was a forum.
It was a
okay,
forum, really?
okay,
Yep, it was up in the lounge.
Okay, well, we just won't tell them what it's gonna be.
there you go. Julie?
And one more comment has to do with the first aid kits and bloodborne pathogen training for all of us that work at the hospital. That became a big deal in about 1985. So with the first aid kits, do we have gloves so that people aren't exposed to? Do you need to maybe say if it's a lot of blood, don't deal with it, make sure the person is safe? I just wonder if that maybe needs to be addressed. If it's a little kid with a paper cut to give them a Band-Aid, that's one thing. If it's somebody that's cracked their head open and there's a lot of blood.
Right.
Chris, are you taking notes? Okay, thank you.
We
The
do.
question was, is there anything about bloodborne pathogens? Because that's such an important component of first aid. And are there gloves in the first aid kits? You know?
So in the classrooms, there are gloves. I know that, but I didn't audit the other first aid kits with you, Clay. So
Clay and I
maybe we
did
need
not
to do
audit
that.
the contents
Okay,
either.
so Julie, the first answer to your question is we will audit them. The second thing is I don't know that there are red bags in those kits, nor that we would. I mean, I can certainly train volunteer staff. Oh yeah, you're all looking at me like, go to the microphone. Sorry. Okay, I'll start over. The first answer to that question is we probably need to do an audit of what's contained in every first aid kit, and we will do that. The second answer, so bloodborne pathogen training, you're right. It's a very different thing between putting a Band-Aid on a little versus someone who is losing a lot of blood, and how do we contain that and keep the person who's responding safe? You know, I guess, how shall I say, we don't have red bags. We don't have a way to we don't have, biohazard bags to dispose those things in. We don't have a separate trash can to dispose of biohazard waste. I think at that point, I think you're right. Like that would be right. Leave it unfortunately for medical personnel, or if you are first aid or CPR certified, respond in the best way that you can, and then wait for medical personnel. But that you're right. But I think we can't answer that very well right now, because that'll have to be something that we'll have to catch up to in the policy. So maybe we, when we think we have it, we send it to Julie, and Julie will edit it.
I just think that might be something to consider
Yep.
when you're doing the training, to say to people, hey, if it's that, you know, you should, or here are your gloves, make sure you want to put the gloves on
And then know how to remove them.
yeah.
Correct. And those, again, these questions are really helpful. This is why we're having this today. Doug?
This might be beyond the scope of this. On the other hand, I would imagine most people in this room really couldn't do CPR if they had to. It's a 15-minute review of CPR, which I know has changed dramatically in the last number of years. Would that be part of this whole process too?
The question was asked whether or not we also should include some CPR training possibly and
Hands only.
some hands, yeah, so
Hands only training.
the 50, yeah, since a lot of us have been certified, it's changed dramatically.
I don't necessarily mean we should all be certified, but
Right,
just exposure.
absolutely. The exposure to it is the question. Great, lots of great comments. This is why we're doing this before we, in case we need to change anything on that sheet. We just really think the safety piece needs to get going and we need to move and at least get some things up. And like I said, the policy manual, we're going to attack on October 4th, 4 or 5 of us, and try and get at it and try and figure out what we're doing. And, you know, the LCM component is a totally new one because they were not in this building before. And, you know, when you think about, you don't want to think about lawsuits and things, but typically when those things happen, it's when somebody has ignored policy or not created policy or not done training. And, you know, we don't want to get into that mess either. So, but it's mostly for our safety. And I guess I wanted to follow just one more thing. I want to comment about all these safety things. You know, in schools, when we did, you know, we were required to do 2 fire drills a year, 2 tornado drills a year, active shooter drill every year. One of the things that was critical were teachers taking attendance, so we made sure every kid was safe. Sometimes with the fire department drill, we would have somebody come in and we talked to a student that was responsible ahead of time and say, would you like to help the fire department? They're going to slip you out of the class line to see if we're missing anybody. And because we did, that was a real thorough thing to make sure teachers and kids were all accounted for, not just kids, adults as well. And so we don't have that luxury in a church if something like that happens. So I'd encourage you to pay attention to who's sitting near you in church. And if there was a disaster, kind of look for that person afterwards. Did that person get out okay? Did they evacuate? Because we don't have attendance list to check over to make sure people are safe. It's all visual and partnering to make this happen. So, any last comments from you?
No, we don't have attendance lists in worship.
We don't have
We
attendance
do.
lists.
We do upstairs.
We're not going to do that. No.
We do
No,
upstairs.
there are no attendance lists. And so, but that's how we found out people were safe, is we were able to account for everybody. And so we don't have that luxury. So if something happens, we need to be thinking about our neighbors. Any other questions or comments? Did I skip anything?
You did
I don't
not,
think so.
you did not skip anything.
Okay, thank you for attending today. And if you've got other ideas, let us know. But like I said, we really are trying to get on this fairly soon and get this going. So if you have other thoughts, you can email one of us. I'd say the next direction is go eat pie, or at least buy some.
Taking this on, this is really important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're welcome. All right. We'll take care of you.
Okay, I'm gonna go check in upstairs.
Oh, you need to have a computer, probably.
I took notes on